Today, we are very lucky to have with us Professor Srinivas Venugopal. He has done some very interesting research in India. He also runs an NGO in India. Let's listen to him. And we have several young discussants who will discuss after him. And then, of course, we will have an open discussion. So without wasting time, over to you, Srini.
Thank you so much for the invite, Subodh. I've been really looking forward to this talk. And thanks to Shruthi, Sarthak, Kaibalyapati, and Himansu as well for joining the conversation. I'm really looking forward to sharing some of my ideas and also looking forward to hearing your thoughts on those ideas and any other areas of interest that you might have. My name is Srinivas Venugopal. I'm an associate professor of marketing at the University of Vermont. And what I'd like to talk to you about today is how entrepreneurship, business, or marketing can help improve well-being in underserved communities around the world. That's a topic that I've been extremely passionate about for more than a decade and a half. But before I launch into this topic, I always find it useful to start with the existential questions. So I'll spend a little bit of time talking about my professional background before I move to academia, mainly because it has continuities with the research that I do now, as well as the extension work that I do now. So many years back, I was a social entrepreneur. And the reason I became a social entrepreneur goes something like this. So here is a cup of coffee. The going rate right now is about $4 or so. And on most days on my way to work, I grab a cappuccino for $4, don't even think twice about it. And it's staggering to think that there are more than 2 billion people around the world who live on less than $4 a day. Just like you and me, they have important needs like education, healthcare, food and nutrition, finance, that they have to meet with just these $4 per capita per day. The marketing world has done a wonderful job of meeting needs in context of affluence. But to me, the fundamental marketing challenge is to be able to meet needs in context of poverty around the world. And in order for us to be able to do that, we would have to rethink the way we create products, as well as rethink or reimagine the way we formulate business models. That's the broad challenge that has animated my professional life for the last 15 years or so. Prior to moving to academia, like I mentioned to you, I was a social entrepreneur, armed, of course, with an electrical engineering degree and the naivete of youth. I started a social venture in a business incubator in IIT Madras called Rural Technology and Business Incubator, focused on education in rural areas. India, as you know, has more than 600,000 villages. A typical village with a population of less than 500 people is unlikely to have access to high quality teachers. If you're a good teacher, chances are that you're in more densely populated urban areas because of quality of life issues as well as access to services. So this is a major challenge for education in far-flung rural areas of India. And many years back, using technology that IIT had come up with for wireless internet access, affordable internet access in small villages, we were able to work with a network of about 80 village level entrepreneurs whom we used as nodal points for delivering online educational services. Of course, in the mid 2000s, this was still a novel idea, even in developed contexts. And the focus for us was to help members in the community either gain access to employment or higher education opportunities. As you know, most of the villages that we worked in had very low pass percentages in 10th and 12th grade exams. And these are very important markers in these communities, particularly for the girl child. If you fail your 10th or 12th grade, chances are that it means the end of your ability to pursue higher education or end of your ability to find employment in the formal economy. In the cultural milieu, parents are likely to say, we'll get you married off and so on. So there are different kinds of gender-related challenges. And my social venture was focused on helping girls in these communities get over these important hurdles. So I ran this venture till about 2008 or so. And in 2008, my venture was acquired, at which point I decided to move to academia. When I moved to academia, I started focusing my research on the actors who were at the forefront of addressing underserved needs in context of poverty. So as part of my research program, I studied three categories of entrepreneurs. One category is subsistence entrepreneurs. These are entrepreneurs who are poor themselves and run survivalist enterprises in order to meet their own needs and the needs of their family members. I also study social entrepreneurs. I've worked with about over 30 social entrepreneurs across 40 continents, addressing important needs like education, healthcare, and so on. And I also study public entrepreneurs who could be policymakers or work for not-for-profits, who can pull policy levers and bring into place mutually beneficial exchanges in low-income settings. So in thinking about my experiences so far in studying various kinds of social enterprises, I've come across multiple mistakes that these social enterprises make again and again. And typically, when we start thinking about poverty, there are two ways in which we approach poverty. One is through abstract theories like poverty traps, or through cold aggregated facts like 2 billion people below $4 a day and so on. What I'd like to do today is explore this topic from the perspective of human stories that underlie these cold aggregated facts or abstract theories. And the goal would be to abstract some key principles or some common mistakes, and in order to think about how we can avoid those mistakes. So that would be the goal of my presentation today. The first mistake that I would like to talk about that social enterprises make is what I call rich person's view of a poor person's needs. Again, let me give you a story to illustrate this. This was a very telling moment in my own research. Many years back, I was working in a refugee camp in Uganda. And one of the respondents that I was working with, he's a young adult, early 20s, and he told me that his way of life goes something like this. He gets up early in the morning, he drinks a lot of water, and plays soccer all day long, and comes back home in the night and eats his 1 square meal a day, and then goes to sleep. So for me as an outsider, this really didn't compute. If you're a person who is calorie constrained, why would you engage in intense physical activity like playing soccer all day? And if you are going to eat just 1 square meal a day, why would you not eat it in the morning? Why would you eat it in the night? What do you think the answer is? Let me ask you folks. I know some of you might be able to guess.
I'll say I don't know.
That's always a very good answer because it's useful to start with humility, right? So when I asked him why he does what he does, he says that the reason he plays soccer all day long is because it distracts him from the hunger that he feels. And the reason he eats his 1 square meal a day in the night is because the only way he can go to sleep is when he feels full at night, right? So for me as an outsider, the abstract theories on nutrition that I was using to understand his life didn't really comport with or didn't really grasp his lived reality of poverty or his life circumstances. So this is a very common problem that I have seen recurring again and again when social enterprises are trying to create solutions for low-income contexts. Most entrepreneurs do not have a lived experience of poverty themselves. So it's very important to start first with contextual immersion so that you can understand people's life circumstances, you can understand contextual realities, as well as the social dynamics that play out in these settings, which could be diverse across different communities. The second important takeaway is to start with radical humility. Instead of going in with a pre-existing hypothesis and trying to seek validation for that, going in with an open mind, seeing what you can learn from these communities and how that can inform the eventual solution that emerges. That's the second point. The third one is I often find that when conducting fieldwork, it is not just about acquiring new knowledge. Often it is about unlearning some unfounded knowledge that we might already possess, that might be creating some blinders for us in creating novel and effective solutions. And finally, this I think is one of the most important points, is avoiding the trap of othering. Thinking of solutions for the poor, who are the other, as opposed to thinking of solutions that you yourself might be willing to adopt as well. So I've seen a lot of solutions that look very cute and interesting, like a soccer ball that has a dynamo that charges a battery, which can be used to light an LED lamp so that children can read in the evening. If you pause to think about whether you would be interested in a solution like this, every time you had to read at night, you had to kick around a soccer ball in order to have an LED, you come to realize that this is not a solution that might be either effective or sustainable. But we often come up with these cute solutions because we start with the process of othering, because we think we are creating solutions for the poor. That's the first mistake. Let me get to the second mistake, which is again a recurring mistake, which is what I call deficit-based thinking. Now, every year, tens of millions of dollars of grant are given away to create financial literacy programs or education for indigenous community members in Australia. Right. And the starting point is that these are communities that were historically non-monetary. They don't know how to use money and benefit from the use of money. So how can we fix this deficit by creating educational programs, right? So that's how you frame the problem to begin with. A group of colleagues and I conducted research with indigenous community members in Australia. And when you talk to community members, they would say that money is not our culture. It is white man culture. They use the word balanda, which if you know the word gringo, it's kind of similar. They see money as something that has been imposed on them from the outside by colonial rulers without their own consent or their participation. So the moment you start talking to community members, it allows you to push back on some pre-existing ways of thinking about this particular issue. So how do you think an insight like this, so something that appears at first blush to be a deficit, if you take a bottom-up approach, it starts looking like a resistance, cultural resistance against something that is being imposed on them from the outside. So how do you think an insight like this can alter the way we approach the issue? Do you folks have any insights on how this might help us come up with some practical solutions?
I'm going to keep quiet because that's my rule. I have lots of thoughts, but I've decided that this is young people's forum and I'm not going to talk. So silence from me.
Don't feel shy, folks.
Sir, actually, I do have a few insights into this topic because I had the opportunity to be a part of a survey that actually was conducted on the tribal people. But I think I will sum up those things as the last. As a main comment as a discussion that will
Sounds
be
good. Sounds good. I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts.
Okay.
So the key takeaway here is the moment you start thinking about this as cultural resistance, this is not to say that you don't need to design educational programs, because these community members still need to use money and benefit from their marketplace exchange. What you can do is integrate aspects of reconciliation into the design of education program itself. Start thinking about how you can use the traditional way in which knowledge is passed down in indigenous communities, which is from elders to younger members in the community. Start thinking about how you can recruit or enlist the support of elders in the community to disseminate knowledge on money use and so on. So acquiring insights, bottom-up insights like that can have a very practical impact on the kind of solutions that you create and how effective these solutions can be. One problem that I have often seen in this area is polar thinking. There are some folks who adopt a paternalistic way of thinking. These are folks who say that we have figured out what the problems are and what the solutions are. The goal is just to get local community members to adopt these solutions. On the other hand, you have the romantic thinkers as well, who write books like Moral Economy or Assault on Paradise, who focus on portraying these local communities in a very romantic way and turn a blind eye towards genuine opportunities for enhancing well-being. It's best to avoid these polar opposites because both of these are views from afar, and these ideological polarities don't survive contact with real-world practical realities, right? So third problem that commonly arises is the problem of airdropping solutions without thinking about how these solutions enmesh with local sociocultural realities. So I have done a lot of work with the Maasai tribe in East Africa, in Tanzania. And one problem that exists there is the problem of fluorosis, skeletal fluorosis, because of the high fluoride content in the water there. The same problem exists in central India as well. So we worked with a group of environmental engineers to see how one can address this problem. And they came up with a technology which is bone char filter, a very effective, cheap technology that can be produced locally with local resources. And they distributed a lot of these bone char filters. And 6 months later, we went back again into the community to see how effective this solution was. We tested the quality of the water going in and the quality of the water coming out. And what we found was, in terms of pathogen content, the quality of the water going into the filter was actually better than the quality of water coming out of the filters. And the reason for that is these bone char filters need to be changed every 3 months or so. And the designers of the solution did not think about interfacing with local entrepreneurs in these communities who have an economic incentive to go around, knock on doors and say that it's been 3 months since you changed your filter. Here is a filter for 5 cents. It will ensure that you can derive sustained value from your filters, right? So when you airdrop a solution from the outside without thinking about how it enmeshes with the local entrepreneurial ecosystem in this case, chances are that the solution will not work in a sustainable way, will not provide value to customers in a sustainable way. When we think about entrepreneurship, we often think about people like Steve Jobs, right? These are the images that it conjures up. Or we think about entrepreneurial hotbeds like the Silicon Valley. But most entrepreneurs in the world are poor themselves and operate survivalist enterprises in context of poverty in what is often referred to as the informal economy. We know very little about the lives of these entrepreneurs and the ventures that they run. And by some estimates, it's suggested that it accounts for over 40% of the GDP in parts of the world like Sub-Saharan Africa, as well as South Asia. And any community that I've done field work in, South America or East Africa or India as well, I've always seen a very vibrant local entrepreneurial ecosystem. And it's very important for us to think about co-creating solutions with this entrepreneurial ecosystem for the end customer, as opposed to shunting them out and trying to create a solution that reaches customers directly. A few other common mistakes. Mistake 4, being market-driven instead of market driving. What does this mean? In developed markets, the principal decision that customers are dealing with is what brands to buy, right? Should I buy brand A or brand B? In emerging markets, in developing countries, the primary decision that people are grappling with is whether to buy something or forego consumption altogether, right? So in developed markets, it's okay for marketing firms to be customer oriented, where they sense and respond to the pre-existing needs of customers. But in developing markets, in order to run a successful marketing campaign, you have to do a lot more. You have to engage in market development activities, which involves creating the conditions necessary for the consumption of well-being enhancing products to occur. Let me give you an example of this. This is from work that anthropologists have done in South America as well as South India and villages of Karnataka. What they found was a lot of pregnant women in these villages in Karnataka would not consume iron when they're pregnant. And as we all know, iron is absolutely necessary for the proper development of the fetus, right? So, what these researchers found was the reason these women were not consuming iron when they were pregnant was because back in the day, 3 or 4 decades back, when people did not have access to hospitals, most of the childbirth or deliveries were administered in the hut, where a midwife would come to your hut, right? And there were fewer complications if the baby was smaller. So there were all these cultural norms that emerged at that time. And this has been seen in South America as well, Central America as well, cultural preference for smaller babies. And over the years, the conditions have changed. We now have access to hospitals. Women are also provided cash to go to hospitals for childbirth in India, for example. But these cultural or institutional behaviors have lingered on because they tend to be sticky. They don't keep pace with changes in circumstances. So women continue to avoid consuming iron. So if you're a marketer trying to solve this problem, and you're only looking at factors like affordability of cheap iron capsules, or availability, how do you work with a village entrepreneur to distribute these iron capsules, you have lost sight of the most important factor, which is even if these iron capsules are available and affordable, women might still not want to consume these iron capsules. So you have to start at the level of stimulating need so that these potentially well-being enhancing products can be consumed in the first place. And this is what I refer to as market development. So market development in emerging markets is way more involved and intricate process as compared to what marketing firms or business firms do in developed country context. Another example of this is SLR. SLR is one of the most successful eyeglass companies in the world. And what they find is there are over 2 billion people around the world, mainly in South Asia, who need access to corrective lenses, but don't gain access to corrective lenses, either because they don't know that they have a problem, or because they don't have a vision entrepreneur in their village who can provide them access to these corrective lenses. If you're a rich person in a village, you can travel to a bigger city. You don't have to rely on daily wage. You can travel to the bigger city and get access to a corrective lens. But the poorer you are in the village, the less access you have to these important well-being enhancing products, not just because they improve your quality of life, but also because they allow you to engage in your livelihood for much longer. So it has economic impacts as well. So what SLR is doing is it's working in India, Nepal, China, in training vision entrepreneurs from villages who can go around from one home to another, testing people for testing people's vision and seeing if they need corrective lenses. And if they do, they can provide access to these lenses as well. So this is an example of a firm that's engaging in market development, where they are creating the conditions necessary for the consumption of this well-being enhancing product. Mistake 5, ignoring the problem of elite capture. Now, this is based on work that I've been doing with a subsistence fishing community in Marina Beach in Chennai. I've been working with them for over 6 years now. And the way of life in the fishing village goes something like this. When you're 8 years old or 10 years old, you drop out from school and you get on the boat with elders in the community. You go into the sea and learn traditional ecological knowledge on how to catch a certain kind of wind at a certain time of the year, to go to a certain place in the sea to catch a certain kind of fish. So this is how life has been lived for multiple generations. If you speak to community members now, they will say that you go to the same place in the sea at same time of the year, and you don't catch the fish that you used to be able to catch, right? So the nature of the sea has completely changed. And they will say that this change happened after the 2004 tsunami. It's a major problem for the community. Traditional wisdom does keep pace with incremental changes in environmental conditions, but disruptive environmental changes that result from climate change as well as overfishing, traditional wisdom is unable to keep pace with. How do you solve a problem like this, where a nature-dependent subsistence community is reeling under the impact of climate change? There are a group of social entrepreneurs in the community who are thinking of different kinds of solutions. And typically when they think of solutions, they look at it from the perspective of shared value creation, which is which involves multiple stakeholders coming together to address important societal issues while also creating economic value. So the definition of social value creation comes to us from economics, but what it does not sufficiently account for is different kinds of sociological dynamics that play out within the community. I'll give you an example of this. So a couple of solutions that they've thought about and airdropped into the community is using GPS equipment and imaging equipment like echolocators that helps you figure out where the fish stock is, go deeper into the sea, and so on. The problem with this is that when you airdrop a solution like this into the community, a subsistence fishing community is not a monolith. There is an income hierarchy even within that community. There are rich fishers in the community who have bigger boats. They can spend a week or so in the deep sea. There are others who use motorized boats who can go about 5 miles, 10 miles into the sea. There are others who are lower down in the income hierarchy, who have paddle boats, who can go a mile or two into the sea. And then there are folks at the lowest level who actually fish on foot in the estuary nearby. A solution like echolocators or GPS, when it's introduced into the community, the richer you are, the more likely you are to adopt these technologies and go deeper into the sea and garner a bigger fraction of the limited fish stock that's available. But the poorer you are in the community, the more disproportionately you are impacted by the imposition of these kinds of solutions from the outside. What this phenomenon points to is the phenomenon of elite capture, where the more powerful members of the community are able to garner a bigger fraction of the value pie for themselves, leaving very little for those who are further lower down in the hierarchy. How do you avoid this problem from occurring? In order to avoid this problem of elite capture, we have to think about 3 processes. The first one is relational work, which requires weaving together of local relationships in a way that is mutually beneficial in creating shared value. Inclusion work, which is about orchestrating the processes necessary for bringing to the table historically excluded or marginalized groups. And then equity work, which is ensuring that the shared value that you do create is equitably distributed across all actors. I'll give you an example of this. Jaipur Rugs is a social enterprise that works with weavers across 4 states in North India. Typically, the way the industry works is that designs come from the outside. Designs for carpets come from the outside. And artisans are seen merely as laborers. who implement the designs of expert designers outside. What Jaipur Rugs is doing is it's trying to flip this logic through an initiative called Manchaha, which crudely translates to heart's desire. So the Manchaha initiative allows women artisans in small villages to create their own designs for carpets and weave those carpets in their small village. What Jaipur Rugs does is it invests in these women entrepreneurs by setting up a home loom, and it provides them all the inputs that they need to start making the carpet. These women, inspired by things that they see around them in the village, make those carpets. And Jaipur Rugs absorbs all the business risk of selling these carpets, right? So first thing they're doing is creating these relationships with village level women entrepreneurs who are traditionally excluded. They also work in Jaipur jail with a lot of incarcerated folks. So they're thinking about integrating into their value chain historically excluded or marginalized groups. And they're also thinking about equity in the sense that how do we ensure that the most vulnerable members of the value chain don't end up absorbing a bigger fraction of the risk? So Jaipur Rugs in this case absorbs much of the business risk. If the carpets don't get sold, Jaipur Rugs absorbs that risk, but the artisans get paid nevertheless. So this would be an example of a social enterprise that's thinking about how the shared value that they're creating is inclusively and equitably distributed across all stakeholders. I'll stop with this final mistake. There are many more, but I'm looking forward to hearing from you folks and engaging in a discussion as well. The final mistake is ignoring cross-domain interdependencies. What do I mean by that? Typically, when we encounter a problem, for example, high absenteeism rate among girls in village schools, we think of solving this education-related problem through solutions within the domain of education, right? We think about what can we do to incentivize girls to come to school? How can we improve the quality of education by teacher training? Can we give them a bicycle so that it reduces the barrier of going to the school? So we typically think of solutions within the domain of education. The pictures that you're seeing on the screen here have something in common, which is the elder child of the family taking care of all the siblings when both parents are out at work making a daily wage, right? So, and typically this responsibility falls on the shoulders of the elder daughter in the household. How do you ensure that girls can continue going to school? You might have to create solutions that are not in the domain of education, but are probably in the domain of creating Anganwadis or creating daycare centers in villages, which is more likely to move the needle on girls' education in these kinds of settings. So we have to think about interdependencies that exist across diverse facets of life and contexts of poverty when thinking about solutions. As a professor in a context where poverty is not a major issue, I don't have to worry about whether my students are hungry when they come to class, right? And if they are hungry, it's because of the decisions that they made. But if I'm a teacher in a small village, I have to think about whether my students are hungry because it will have a direct impact on their ability to absorb the knowledge that's imparted in schools. I do not have the luxury of narrowly focusing on education alone. So this is at the level of envisioning solutions. I'll also talk a little bit about thinking about interdependencies when measuring impact. So I tracked about 25 women entrepreneurs in a low-income slum in Chennai for about 5 years. So every December, I spent a month in Chennai working with these 25 women entrepreneurs. And one woman entrepreneur that I was working with, she said she makes about $10 net income per month running her bottled pickle business from home, which even in that setting, it's not a lot of money, $10 net income per month. So I asked her, why do you put in so much effort for just $10 per month? And she said, this is the first time in my life that I have money in my hands that I can spend in any way of my own choosing. I can buy a chocolate for my daughter or son without having to rely on my husband. It's changed the way I look at myself and what I think I'm capable of doing, right? So if we only remain focused on the monetary transformation in her life, we miss much of these micro level transformations by way of how she sees herself, right? So impacts can play out across domains as well. So the next question I asked her was, why bottle pickle business? Why didn't you choose some other business? To which she said, when I first spoke to my husband about wanting to start a business, he said, I don't want you to start a business because you'll become arrogant and start talking back to me, right? So what she had to navigate was not just the constraints of poverty, but also subordination in a strongly patriarchal kind of local milieu there. So she didn't have the luxury of either rebellion or complete conformity to social norms. So she had to negotiate with her husband and say, I'll run this bottle pickle business because I can do it from within the threshold of the home. And so he felt like he was still in charge. And over 3 or 4 years that I was able to track her, he was able to see things that she was able to accomplish. And slowly she was now, doing her business more broadly in the neighborhood that she's a part of. So there are all these micro level transformations across domains that play out over an extended span of time. And it's important for us to understand those interdependencies as well when measuring impact of these well-being enhancing solutions. I've talked for quite a bit. I'll pause there, and I'm looking forward to hearing your ideas and your interests as well.
Okay, thank you very much. It's a very clear exposition. Let's move to the younger people. I think Sarthak is first. So let's, maybe you can start sharing the screen so that we can see the speakers more broadly. Yeah, so Sarthak, please, go ahead.
Hello, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Always inspiring to listen to you talk about research so passionately. Now, I also read through the document that you had also shared on shared value, and you also talked about shared value for a fair bit here. I just wanted to understand, I looked at probably the domain has been very vibrant since the early 2000s or even before, but that particular article written by Michael Porter, and of course, he was the second author, was written in 2011. So I just want to understand from you, considering all these challenges, has this concept of shared value as envisaged by Michael Porter and his authors, has it delivered on its promise? I say that because of a couple of things that I also have personally noticed. So they clearly talk about the shared value in a very crude economic way, that you make money, we make money, you make money, sort of a thing, right? They clearly position themselves as doing social. They don't say that we are doing social benefit. They say social benefit is not required. It's not charity, but you gain, we gain. But I'm just thinking, and they give examples of celebrated solutions like Shakti HUL. So what happens in Shakti HUL? So yeah, sure, the women entrepreneurs get paid. Sure, they make a living now who were absolutely on the fringes. But do they also take into account what happens to them when they go back home? For example, you right now said they live in a very, very restricted, restricted patriarchal society. So more so in a rural setting where education is not really available. So people probably settings are more patriarchal in that nature. What happens to them when they go back home after a day's work, after being Shakti Amma for a whole day? What happens to them when they go back home? What happens to the money that they earn? Is it really for them? Can they really buy chocolate for their daughters with that money, or does that go straight away to their husbands? And same example with the self-help groups also. Like my interactions with these sort of communities has always been that the first problem that you illustrated was elite capture. The subsistence community is not really monolithic in nature. There are, of course, agents who are more educated, who are more senior. Probably they make better living. They are from upper caste. So think of an Adivasi and a higher caste individual forming a self-help group together. And often what I've heard is that the higher caste enjoys the benefits that comes out of SHG. So they are more, they have more access to these loans. They have more access to these incomes and all that. But Adivasis never dare to touch that money. They are just there because there's some representation that is needed. So I'm just saying, overall, my question being that how do we sort of tie these loose ends? And if we think of entire things as a marketing system, how do we deal with these externalities? And has this shared value lens delivered on its promise after like 12 years of writing that article?
Right.
That's all.
So it's very important to attend to these complex social realities that you mentioned. But let me first address the issue of shared value and that article that's been widely read in the business world. The reason that article has been successful is because the audience for that article was senior business leaders who would typically cede the territory whenever it came to addressing societal issues. They would cede the territory to either governmental organizations or to not-for-profits, right? And what that article is talking about is don't be so quick. You folks run major businesses with deep pockets. You should be thinking about how you can address some of these major societal issues. So you should have a seat at the table. And it is not to suggest that this is the only kind of entity that can move the needle on the issue. So the article has been successful in garnering attention among major business leaders who have started implementing different kinds of solutions to make social impact. Now, where the article is, I think, deficient is that it doesn't account for a lot of the sociological realities at the ground level. I saw many of you are working at the ground level, and most of you would have exposure to complex ground level realities that might prevent these big picture top-down ideas from really making an impact at the ground level, right? And that's where I think we need to keep the conversation going and start talking about how can we gain bottom-up insights as well in order to create ground-up solutions that are effective in the long run. So some of the points that I was talking about was to expose ground level complexities. And the reason I focused on mistakes is because now the pendulum has swung to the other direction, where a lot of firms are thinking about creating solutions, but they're not aware of how some of their solutions might actually be making the problems even worse, right? And in my view, the first principle always has to be do no harm, right? And if you start with that perspective, you think about opportunities for making an impact, but you also think about how you might be contributing to either sustaining inequities or even exacerbating societal inequities.
Okay. Sarthak, you have anything else you want to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to also, it's interesting that you make that point that it was also popular amongst business people, because I also did a quick search on how many people have critiqued the article. Because I thought it's a fairly long bit of time. People must have written something about it, something negative about it also.
That's right.
And I was also, I mean, very intuitively, it was not surprising at all that its critique articles were more popular than the very article itself.
Absolutely.
I'm purely talking in terms of citations.
That's right.
So if I got hold of an article which has about 1,300 citations. Written in 2014, 3 years after this was written, while this has only 800 something citations.
That's
so that tells me scholarly world is definitely not very convinced with the idea, while the business people
Absolutely. So the article was probably successful in getting the conversation going, right? And if there are other people who are providing countervailing ideas, I think at a systemic level, I think it means that we are focusing on these societal issues, but we're also beginning to think deeply about the complexities and the limitations of the idea. The last thing we want is, I think the business world is well known for magic bullets, right? So trafficking in magic bullets, you do this one thing and it solves all problems. And I think what this has led to is a conversation that is way more rich and that has unpacked some of the complexities involved in creating social impact. Thanks for that.
Thank you so much. That's all.
Okay, who's next? I had written down the order. Himansu, I didn't put your name, so you will be last, but that's okay. Shruthi,
I believe it's me.
Yeah, it's you. Yeah, go ahead.
Thanks so much, Professor, for such an interesting presentation. I really enjoyed reading and also listening to you about
could you just introduce yourself so that others know?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. It's Shruthi. I am an Environment, Social and Governance Manager for Arise IIP. I live in Sierra Leone, and my academic background is political science, international relations. Jumping back into the conversation we are having, super interesting, really interesting to hear about shared value as a concept. And also just, with the conversation we just had, I think it's so interesting that this is a concept has come across simply because it also pushes corporates to not just think about profit, but also people and planet, right? And the time that it came in was early 2000s, so slightly earlier. So I think just as a concept, despite whatever flaws it may have, I think the fact that it puts that onus and that pressure onto corporations to think more about people and planet is pushing it in the right direction.
Right.
Having said that, just two observations on the concept itself. One, that because what shared value does is it tries to integrate economic and social interest, but inherently economic and social interest have not sat together and have often been at polar opposites. So it's interesting that, as a concept, we are trying to put it together, whereas practically it might not be the case. And a second observation was the co-creation aspect itself, right? How important it is while we are doing, whether it's a social entrepreneur trying to do a project, whether it's a corporate, the idea of co-creation is being so important. But this is also where maybe some of the externalities that both you and Sarthak mentioned, important to acknowledge power, important to acknowledge position, hierarchy, so super important, right? But my question, or something that I wanted to discuss with all of you was, I do think that over the last couple of years, large corporations have tapped really into this creating shared value idea. It has become a huge conversation topic in the way that marketing and branding has come. The focus is never on the product itself, but a larger idea of it being a social product or an environmental product. But what this has also led is pinkwashing and greenwashing to a great extent. And now large corporations enjoy huge profits over the look of pinkwashing or greenwashing. So perhaps what I wanted, what were your thoughts on this? Is it possible to mitigate this pinkwashing or greenwashing? That's one question. And a second one before I end is, you've been doing research on this topic for a long time. You mentioned that it's been almost a decade. I'm just wondering, what do you see what is the changing trend? What was it then? What is it now?
Absolutely. I think some of the risks that you brought out in terms of greenwashing and pinkwashing, they're absolutely real. And what I find to be very important in this entire field is avoiding extreme ideologies, right? So there are some folks who become activists for creating social impact, and they're unable to see many of these risks that you spoke about, like greenwashing. At the same time, there are some who become so cynical only looking at greenwashing that they are not able to see the practical ways in which some firms have made a positive impact on people's lives. So it's important to know that these ideological positions that we take from afar do not survive contact with ground level realities. So we, at the end of the day, the place where the rubber meets the road is at the ground level, where people are either benefiting or not benefiting from your product. So that has to be the the final arbiter of whether the ideas work or not. In terms of the evolution, the problem that I have found with this conversation generally in social entrepreneurship literature is that it moves from one fad to another, right? And there's one idea that's sold as a magic bullet, as a solution to everything. For the longest time, it was microfinance. Microfinance is the magic bullet that solves everything. And in the last few years, it swung in the other direction, where people say microfinance is driving indebtedness, farmer suicides, and all kinds of other issues. So it's become a bad word now. I think microfinance works in a lot of circumstances, and in a lot of circumstances, it doesn't work. So it's important to go deeper into those complexities instead of thinking at a very macro level as a blanket solution that either works or not. So I think the conversation, the more it peels the deeper layers of social impact, the more beneficial it'll be, as opposed to moving from one fad to another in terms of solution for many of the problems that we see in local communities.
Shruthi, any
Thanks.
more from you?
Not for now. Thanks.
Okay, Kaibalyapati, I think you're next. Please introduce yourself so that people know who you are.
Hello everyone. I'm Kaibalyapati Mishra. I'm doing a PhD in economics at Institute for Social and Economic Change, Bangalore in India. And my area of broad area of focus is applied macroeconomic theory, and which is I'm doing a PhD on doctoral admission process, which is a mixture of development economics and economics of education. And I could really relate to what Sir told about the school attainment part of rural and gender-based segregation part of it. And I recently had a working paper in which I found out that this sort of discrepancy across gender is actually high, in which I'm starting that the probability of choosing a private school for a male or against a female child of a family, and I found that it's quite significant in terms of that sort of segregation. And I would like to, as I mentioned earlier, also I'd like to substantiate a few of the things that you have mentioned here in this delightful talk. From my own personal experience, I had the opportunity of being a surveyor on behalf of Odisha Mining Corporation, in which we were trying to evaluate the impact of mining in a particular Bargarh district of Odisha. In which, because the mining corporation was looking forward to expanding its limits, and there was a need for evaluation. So I had the exposure to a few of the tribal communities, and I could absolutely relate to a few things that you said from your international experiences regarding that. Drinking water and playing soccer all of the day. So I had this experience where not only one or two people, most of the poor community people in that area. Himansu can relate to this thing also, because he is also from Odisha. So there is a sort of drink, like wine sort of thing. We call it handia. Maybe you must have heard about this thing also. So that is made of basically rice, and you just stock the rice for a few days and keep it under the sun, and it has some alcohol content. So in those rural and Adivasi prone areas, they used to drink this thing, I think, at 5 rupees or 10 rupees per glass every day, so that they don't feel the hunger. Having the alcohol content in it, so they walk throughout the day. And within the Adivasis, there are what we call banjaras, who don't have their definite home to stay, and they have this as their staple food, as against to rice or other things. So they continue to consume this at a daily basis. And you rightly pointed out the cultural part of we suggesting the public policy and research papers, the academicians research suggesting people about doing things like, if you're going to want to reduce the infant mortality rate, and if there are situations where the mother's milk is not sufficient for the infant to get enough nutrients, then people just go on to suggesting that give them cow milk. But in such situations, there is the cultural bottleneck that they have cows. They have almost in every house, no matter how poor how it is there, they have cows. But they have the belief that says that will you let your milk go away to some other kid if you had to share your milk? That you will not do. So those people are so good. In terms of humanitarian perspective, they feel that only the calf has the right over the cow's milk, so nobody else gets the milk. So in such situations, having interventions, pushing the people to drink milk to get the nutrients as the fast end solution, it doesn't work well in such situations, as
Right.
if you see. And regarding the market thing, I personally had a very, insightful experiences with a lady where in Cuttack, where I did my masters. So in Cuttack there is this market, so in which you will find banana go downs, and there plenty of bananas are coming. So there is a lady, I call her the, just term her the banana lady. So what she does is that she collects the banana that are like, that usually people will not look forward to buying. That is some sort of damaged, but the inherent thing and content is, intact. So she collects those things for free, and sells that like at a, subsidized, or you can say at half price. And she had customers, continuously like me, who used to go and buy such things. So a policymaker's perspective will not get these sort of things, that they try to find a solution from the problems that they are having. And I think any public policy should be, have this broader perspective to inculcate all these things. And from that Adivasi experience also, I would definitely say that we just tend to ignore the fact that the Adivasi people, and those who are staying in those areas, they are good people. But if you see that goodness that they have, like if you go there, they are really affectionate, they are really loving. But if you see, deep inside, they don't have the market motive. If they have something to like sell and earn a good amount of money, also they lack that market motive. Just like this banana lady, if you see from Cuttack, who lives in a market and this sort of situation. So maybe the poverty level, if you compare, will be similar, but the motive to tackle their poverty is dissimilar because of the environment that they are actually living in. So dealing with one sort of poverty programs at the two different places can have different sort of consequences. Some place it can be effective, and some place it just can be ineffective. And lastly, I would like to conclude. I just had the opportunity to read this book by John Dries, by this Sense and Solidarity, in the first chapter, if you look into it. So there he discusses at extent about this action-based research, wherein the experience versus evidence sort of thing, and finding the right striking balance between both of them. So I think I absolutely agree with that thing, and I think you are also touching to some of the aspects, like individuals sitting at a different state of the country and using some data crunching and coming up with estimates. With, doesn't matter, regression, discontinuity, or difference indifference, they are not making much difference in terms of helping the policy or to be more informed as compared to the experience that we might be having, in terms of gaining the field knowledge. And lastly, about the shared value thing, I absolutely enjoyed that paper. And I sort of disagree with Sarthak's point about the citation thing, because maybe you should have done a second tier analysis. The second paper that has more citations, maybe that second paper, the criticizing paper, is criticized more rather than Sir's paper. Maybe citation are very, yeah. So that's one thing. But what I could not understand, the difference between CSR and the shared value that you have given. I could not strike the absolute difference between both of them. It does sound like some sort of Nash equilibrium sort of things, where like both the parties gain here, like society and corporation. But maybe if you could put some light on that.
That's a very important question. Let me start with the last question that you asked, the difference between CSR, corporate social responsibility, and shared value creation. And the best quote that I found for this comes from Indra Nui, where she says that shared value creation is about how you make your money as a business. It's not about how you spend your money. So CSR would be things like you buy one shoe, I give one shoe free for a child in sub-Saharan Africa, right? Tom's Shoe has a strategy like that, where you make money doing your business, selling to people that you usually sell to, but from the profits that you make, you give away part of your money to some development costs. So that is considered broadly as CSR, corporate social responsibility. There, the way you make your money is disconnected from the way you make social impact. In the case of shared value, the way you make your money is aligned with how you make social impact. So the better you are at doing that business, more social impact you will make in the process. So that's the primary distinction between a CSR approach as opposed to a shared value approach, where making social impact is central to your core business model. It's not on the periphery. Some of the other points you made about the complexities at the ground level. So this comes up again and again across different contexts. In the fishing community example I gave you, so every year for 2 months, there is a blanket fishing ban because it's the spawning season created by an outside expert. Technically, it makes sense that that's the spawning season. You don't want to catch fish at that time. But it also assumes that the local fishing community does not have agency or mechanisms required to take care of the sea that their livelihood depends on. If you talk to community members, they say that you've banned me from going into the sea for 2 months, but unless I go to the sea on a day-to-day basis, I cannot put food on table. You didn't take into account my life circumstances. Another thing is, for my grandfather's grandfather has been doing the same business. During the spawning season, we go to a different place in the sea where we catch fish that does not impact the spawning, fish. So they have different kinds of mechanisms internally based on their ecological knowledge, which they harness in order to safeguard the sea because their livelihood depends on that. But external technocratic experts sitting in their armchairs will see this as they have an incentive to exploit fish stock in the sea, so let's do a blanket ban. That's a problem that arises across different communities. If you talk to community members, they'll say, people like you have access to human capital that we measure in terms of educational degrees, or you have bank balance, they will say. But people like us, the only thing we rely on is nature for our survival. Natural capital is the only thing they have access to. And if external technocratic experts don't understand that relationship that they have with nature for their survival and craft policies that don't take that into account, it can very easily worsen the problem for them. Another thing I would say is it is also very easy to fall into the romantic trap. I worked in the community for more than 6 years, and in the beginning, they would say things like, look around the community and see how many people wear spectacles. And you look around and say that hardly anybody wears any spectacles. And they say it's because of the food that we eat. We are bestowed with all the nutrition we need, so we have best eyesight, right? And initially, I was really taken by this narrative. And you weren't long enough in the community, and then slowly you start seeing them struggle to read the GPS and things like that. So clearly it's a narrative that they've created within the community, and it's very persuasive when you enter the community to fall into that romantic trap till you spend time, a long time there to see that that might be a blinder that is preventing you from creating value. So that's the reason why I say that it's important to acknowledge strengths that exist. At the same time, don't fall into the romantic trap as well. Both of these create blinders for us. Thank you so much for your questions. I'm really enjoying the conversation and learning a lot from all your experiences.
Well, great. Let's have Himansu. He's been waiting patiently, but let's go ahead, Himansu.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. I am Himansu Sekhar Thapa. I am a PhD scholar at Center for Development Studies, Trivandrum. So I'm currently working in agriculture economics, my broad theme is, and in that I'm working in millet cultivation and rural livelihood. So I have few observations from the topic that Professor Venugopal very nicely explained. Actually, it was a very good and informative topic for me, because the notion is that when we talk about social enterprise, so before the word social is added to the enterprise. So when only we talk about enterprise, then the motive is like we say that this is only for the profit motive or something like that. Because if we have the example of crony capitalism or something, many things are like that, whose main aim is for generating profit, making their own, adapt to their own profitability and all. But then we talk about the government scheme, public policies and all, because public policies, they mostly think about uplifting the people who are, the downtrodden people who are below the poverty line or something like that. So, but when we talk about social enterprise or public enterprise, if we talk about public enterprise, then in some sense they becomes less performed compared to the private enterprise. So in that sense, I think the government should come to help the social enterprises so that they can try hands between together and they can do something good about that. They can take it into a high level, right? So apart from that, because the government intervention here, I think is very important because we have this, institutional setup. So when we talk about institutional setup, then, social norms, then so many things are there. And when we target a particular sector, a section of the population, we see there are so many diversities. For example, on the basis of, caste hierarchies, then race, then gender, so many things are there. So when in this context, you talk about the shared value thing. So in this shared value, there are like one party, they benefit, another, they don't get the benefit out of that. This happens because of the power relations between this, even if they belong to a particular, particular poor group, then also they have a different ability, economic ability, social ability, based on their social position. So it is very important at that place that we need to find a solution where we can, make a balance shared value to all the sector of the society so that they can benefit out of this social enterprise. Because I think this is very important, because without that, if you think that you are doing some social enterprise, we are producing some services, we are producing the goods that might help some sector of the society, but then it will create an imbalanced kind of situation. So this, I think, is very important to think about. And and one more thing I would like to highlight here is that when we talk about this social enterprise, I think this should not start from the corporate people mainly. I think there should be some more employment of the local people of that particular area, so that in one hand, they can get employment out of that. Secondly, they can understand the local scenarios and what are the points they should target. They can understand better because they are the people from that particular underdeveloped area. So I think employment of that local people, understand the social norms which is prevailing in their area, that is very important.
Absolutely.
So this is all my observations. Yeah.
That's a very important point. Let me start with that first, the importance of local entrepreneurs. So the local entrepreneurs have to be at the foundation of creating solutions. They have the local knowledge necessary to create effective solutions. They have access to social capital locally within the village or within the community. That is a crucial resource to create effective solutions. They also have the entrepreneurial drive, right? So unless we tap into local entrepreneurs in these communities, it's very difficult to create solutions that are effective. Another reason social entrepreneurs are crucial is because they allow us to scale with diversity. Now, a 20-year-old person living in Bombay is likely to be very similar to a 20-year-old person living in New York in terms of the shows they watch on Netflix or things like that. But that person living in Bombay is likely to be very different from somebody living in a small village in Maharashtra, right? And the diversity across different villages is even more. And in order for us to create solutions, we have to think about how to attend to this diversity of settings that we find in developing countries. We cannot have a cookie cutter kind of a solution that works across all situations. And the only way we can create diverse solutions that are in line with the local situations in these communities is by enlisting the support of local entrepreneurs. So we often talk about scaling solutions. And we say that if your solution is very local, then it does not scale across multiple contexts. So it has a scaling problem. The scaling problem is only true if you're thinking about scaling the final template of the solution. The scaling problem is not true if you're thinking about the process that you used to create that solution, right? So the process scales across context. It might lead to diverse solutions across diverse settings, but the final solution or the end template of the solution itself might not scale. So local entrepreneurs are absolutely crucial in this. Another thing that you can learn from local entrepreneurs is that we often, when we think about entrepreneurship or business, the first thing that comes to mind is competition, right? Does it always have to be the case? One example that I like to give is outside temples in India, you would find a lot of flower sellers, right? And there's this research that was done with flower sellers outside the temple. And what they found was if one female entrepreneur is not sitting in her shop and you go and stand in front of her shop, a neighboring entrepreneur will come and sell you the stuff and put the money in the cash box of the entrepreneur who is not there. And if you ask her, why are you helping your competitor? She will say that that person has to survive too, right? And they are seeing this not as a competition or as a zero-sum game. They are seeing this more as a collaborative enterprise to ensure that everybody is able to make a living. So what we are interested in here is not what entrepreneurship is, but what entrepreneurship can be. In that, I think the lessons that we learn from these entrepreneurs, subsistence entrepreneurs in context of poverty, can really help us reimagine entrepreneurship in a way that helps us not only create shared value, but also ensure that that shared value is inclusively distributed as well as equitably distributed across settings.
Okay, thank you all. Let's have an open discussion if anybody has any points to make. After all, well, let me just say that I'll keep my mouth shut. My wife says I talk too much. I finally agreed with her, and I've decided that I pontificate enough, and there's no point in my saying anything except that I hope others will listen to it and keep these mistakes in mind and not make them when they are out to do something. Thank you very much for putting them in a very clear and simple way so that we know what to avoid in terms of the mistakes that have been made. We shouldn't make them again. And I think my objective was, of course, to listen to Professor Venugopal, but also to invite young people and see whether we can make this format work. And from that point of view, I'm happy to see that it works. It has worked well today, and I hope more people will use this format so that, society catches up to the fact that people in India and neighboring countries, the educated young people, are actually world-class. But there is no format for them to express their views and opinions, and there should be. And so this is my personal revolution, okay, that I want to flip society from seniors talk and juniors listen to juniors talk and seniors listen, which is why I don't want to talk. But I will say one thing, as a very technical point as an economist, when you talk of market development, which is one of the things I actually did in 1994 for solar energy. And the result today you can see in Bangladesh, 6 million people with solar panels on their homes. So I'll just briefly tell you what it takes to create a market. Okay. So you have to look at sort of four things: the supply side, the demand side, the regulator and certifier, and the subsidy scheme. You have all four of those. For the producer, you have to make sure that the producer gets the inputs needed on a certified basis. You are trying to help the producer make some things. Producer needs the inputs. And if when you create a market, it's a new product, obviously, or something new is happening. So the producer will need some inputs, and you need to ensure that the inputs are regularly available and are of quality in some fashion. It is ensured. And actually what we did in Indonesia was We defined the standards for solar panels, the batteries, the charger, and ultimately they came to be known as the World Bank standards, and now they are universal standards for solar home systems in rural areas. So the producer of the system that is to be sold doesn't have to decide whether the battery she or he is buying is going to work. The battery manufacturer has to give a certificate that this battery is certified. Okay, so you certify the inputs to the producer. Then when you look at the consumer side, you realize that not everybody can buy it, and you have to give them awareness of what this product can actually do for you, or what is the authenticity of this product. So there's an information campaign that is needed, so that you need to make sure that the consumer knows that they are getting a genuine product or a real product, or whatever it is, that information, because the information asymmetry is there, and the information market doesn't always work well, because it's like a public good. So you have to have a public production of the knowledge for the consumer. Okay, that look, this is what it is. Okay, you can't just, so, and what that ultimately, it also, you need some kind of a certifier or regulator. Okay, because it's a new product, and how do you know that this is what you're getting? Here's a information that I got, but how do I know that the product I'm getting is actually meeting these things? So you need some kind, and we have these, it's not something brilliant new. It was new in 1994, but this Woolmark and all these are certificates, fair trade practice and all. Nowadays we have so many of these certificates which say that, look, it's fair trade. How do we know it's fair trade? It's naturally caught fish. How do I know that is sustainable fishing? Well, Monterey Foundation in California has certified it. I'm just selling it to you. Why would you trust me? So you need some kind of a certifier or regulator if you are going to create a market. And then, of course, you may need some kind of subsidies. And then you have to have a well-defined subsidy scheme which is effective and workable. And let me say that when I defined that subsidy scheme, my whole team rebelled against it. They said it's madness. I said, no, I won. But ultimately, the minister said it's madness. We can't have this. So they forced me to go to the minister and explain to the minister. And ultimately, I knew that you can't talk to a minister in economic theory. So I had to talk to him as an Asian to Asian. And in 2 minutes, he says, get out of here. It's approved. So I'm not talking to you as an economist. I'm talking to it's Indonesia. So, okay, so these are the elements in creating a market. I'm talking from experience, that market we created quite successfully. And all these elements were there, so that we had the inputs to the producer. We had competition among the sellers, the producers. We had subsidies for the producer. And we had, way back in 1995, the producer would give a postcard to each home. And all they had to do was to mail this postage paid postcard to the office in Jakarta. And we could summon the producer and say, why is the system not working? You don't have to read, don't just mail that postcard with your name and your address on it. And then there would be a complaint against the producer. And then we could haul up the producer and say, why is these systems not working? What's going on? So we had, and of course, I went to Bangladesh in 2008, and I asked, I've also had a sample survey. By then, of course, you could send SMS, but we also used to say, I also had a sample survey scheme that checked what's happening. And IDCOL, which is running one of the most successful programs in Bangladesh, it's a great agency. I asked them, how do you design the sample survey? They laughed at me, said, sir, we don't do a sample survey, we check every household. I said, now I know why this program is so successful. It's not because of the design, it's because of the fact that you people are implementing it so well. So in the end, you need, and so the IDCOL is running as a certifier, regulator, a distributor of subsidies, etc. So if you have that kind of a market in mind, then that's what you also need. Anyway, that's it from my side, and I thank you all very much. in case anybody has any last words, Professor, you have some last words to sum up?
No, it's been a wonderful conversation, and I look forward to staying in touch with all of you. You're all doing very interesting work, so happy to help in any way I can. So please do stay in touch.
Okay, wonderful. And thank you all young people. It's great to know that you are there and you are thinking about these things and doing good work. And certainly as the lessons, the mistakes, the cynical side of me has always said, don't make mistakes that other people have made, make your own. Once you are free from other people's mistakes, the field is, because you will make mistakes. Okay? There's no way to think that you won't make a mistake. You will make a mistake, but it shouldn't be what others have already done. When you are at my age, you can say, yes, we all make mistakes, but let them be yours. Okay? Let them be new ones. Let not be the ones that Professor Venugopal has already pointed out. Make your own. Okay, go ahead and be daring and get things done. I will send you in the follow-up email of something that I'm personally involved in practical terms in India. And I don't want to waste the time here to discuss it. And hopefully I'll get your support and comments and criticisms of that by email rather than from here. Okay.
Absolutely.
All
Looking forward to that. And
Yeah.
thank
All
you
right.
so much again,
Yeah.
Subodh, for the invite.
Yeah.
Really
All right.
enjoyed the conversation.
Okay, let's end the recording and then we can talk a little bit if anybody is still here.